Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Talking About Marvel Star Wars 1977 stream, our second intro. Just checking again for the sound. Anyone who's there, please let me know in the next couple of sections how I'm doing. Well, I get us underway. Alrighty, thank you for the confirmation. Tonight's something a little easier for me to do and, give you something to watch while also not being so distracting because, silly me, I thought that a turn-based RTS game would somehow be easy to do while also streaming something a little easier for me this go-around. Risk of Rain 2. Fun little shooter game. Not usually my style, but this is sort of the type of game I usually play where I just turn off the volume completely and listen to something else. But I figured this should be a bit easier for me this go around and I'll sound a little more coherent and not as distracted as I was last time. So anyway, bit recap for anybody tuning in or watching afterwards. We are once again continuing with Marvel Star Wars, the original 1977 run, 108 issues in total. And once again, for those of you who either don't have a physical copy or can't be bothered, there's a link in the website where you can check out a website where you can read the comic online. And we're starting from issue 16. Just letting you folks know. Gonna be a bit of a weird one this far because here we're going through quite a few issues, but like the first two are very much one-off things, though the first one is kind of a setup for something that happens much later, and pretty much the rest is going to be this very long single arc. Also, because I had to be corrected about it the last time, I'm going to be keeping a closer track on who is doing the writing and art duties for each issue as it comes. And so we're still on Archie Goodwin as writer and editor, though we have, this time on art duty, Walt Simonson and Bob Wiaszczyk. Ugh, sounds East European, and I am terrible with those. Let me know how the game sound is, if it's not overwhelming or if it's too loud for you, that you can't hear what I'm saying. And of course, again, so that I can devote as much of my brain power as possible to this, I am definitely going on easy mode. And choose my unlockable items. So, again, for anyone who's new to this whole comic series was pretty much the baby of Roy Thomas, one of Marvel's most famous editors. He was pretty much the guy who stepped in to the editor-in-chief role after Stan Lee decided to step aside. And he was really the only one that was pulling for both Star Wars as a property and the idea of a Star Wars promotional comic. No one else really believed in it as much as he did, and many didn't think it would work at all. It was the idea that this sort of thing just would not sell. And so, given that Star Wars became what it did, I do love to imagine that afterwards, Roy Thomas just went through the offices of Marvel the next day, trying not to be too smug about how he was vindicated. And so, the comic series, there are a lot of elements, particularly in terms of the writing, that's a little too hokey and dated, and a lot of other elements that have been sort of retconned and done over much better by later Star Wars to regard the old Marvel comic line as canon. But I did think that this was still something worth talking about, especially as, in many ways, a very foundational piece of Star Wars history. Right up there with Splinter of the Mind's Eye. And especially in the early parts of the comic run, Marvel Star Wars leans real hard into its pulp origins. Now, I admit I'm very much a big fan of pulp, so that sort of thing is usually my jam. So I don't really have that many. So again, apart from some of the like very hokey Silver Age writing, I don't have too many issues with this comic series. It's just that again, there are several elements that I'm not a big fan of, and other elements that were done better in other Star Wars stories. But that out of the way, and all my liquids in place to make sure I don't dry up my throat. We begin with issue 7, which is kind of a standalone little thing, and it's mostly set up for something that comes later. Specifically, we're setting up an antagonist. Let me just quickly check his name to make sure I'm on the right mark. Yes, a fellow by the name of Valance. Who is basically the leader of a mercenary outfit. And issue 16 opens up with him basically out to destroy his past, as the narrator puts it. Let me see if I can find the exact name. Yes, it's Telos. The name of the place is Telos, but it's got a number after it, and I can't recall the number off the top of my head. But basically, it's a medical station. But yeah, it's interesting. I have to wonder how much if BioWare was aware of this when they just, or no, it was Obsidian who did. Well, no, Telos was mentioned in Knights of the Old Republic 1, but it only appears in Knights of the Old Republic 2. But it kind of makes you wonder if maybe the guys behind the KOTOR games were aware of this comic, or if this is just a weird coincidence, because Telos does have a kind of sci-fi-esque sounding name that it's not exactly like it would be uncommon. So anyway, Valance and his gang are basically destroying everything in this medical station on Telos. Let's see. Yeah, I like the ukulele because I like the multi-lightning damage. Yeah, that's more like it. But it seems that what especially Valance wants to do is he wants to destroy all of the droids at the medical station, and he wants to destroy, I believe, its main computer, specifically the part of it that contains all of the data that's recorded within. I guess all the records, for lack of any better term. Now, this obviously doesn't seem to connect very well to whatever's going on in the main storyline, which of course, is following our main trio as well as the droids. But it seems that among the medical patients is a familiar face if you've been following the comic, and one that I'll admit, when I read this for the first time, did not expect to see again. It's the crazy old man, Don Juan Quixote, the crazy, the Don Quixote homage, who thought he was a Jedi Knight but really wasn't. Apparently, he's really ill, and unfortunately, he is left to die because Valance and his men rigged the medical station to blow up, and he goes with it. However, when the mercenaries bust in, they find the old man in his bed ranting about the recent events on, let's see if I can recall the name, it's still so forgettable, Aduba 3, I can recall that at least, yes. For those of you who didn't see the first part, the very first story arc was basically Han Solo initially trying to, take that money the rebels gave him and buy his way out of that debt to Jabba. Nope, liquid. But he ended up losing it, of course, and ended up in a kind of Seven Samurai Magnificent Seven style situation where he and a bunch of ragtag other down on their luck spacers helped a village against a bunch of bandits. Yes. And yes, that's basically what Quixote is ranting about in his like half delirious state. Let's see. Yeah. And he mentions, specifically, his words are, the boy and his droid. Now, he's referring to one of the other sort of ragtag members that teamed up with Solo and Chewie to save the village. This farm boy named Jim, who had a droid by the name of Effie. Now, Effie was the last one of the members of the gang that died during the fight to fend off the bandits, because, of course, you know, like I said in the previous one, it's not a Seven Samurai homage without some casualties among the main cast. Yes. And apparently, when this is reported to Valance, you know, the old man's rantings, it kind of lights a fire under Valance's tail, though, of course, we are kept in the dark as to exactly what that is. All we know for sure is that Valance at this point really, really hates droids, and there's something about his past that he wanted to bury, and that's the whole reason why he's attacked this medical station and blown it up. Oop, a bit tricky there. Yes. Let me turn that. Okay. So I guess our soon-to-be antagonists depart, and we actually catch up with two more members of Han's ragtag gang of heroes. Jackson, the Lepidus carnivorous. So literally, he's a big green Bugs Bunny-looking rabbit, but as the name implies, he does not eat carrots. And what's her name? Yes, Amaza. Basically, both the sort of the token girl and the token exploitation aspect of the story, because space bikini. I admit I am sort of something of a unapologetic prude, so I've never been a big fan of skimpy clothing on female characters in sci-fi and fantasy. You know, and again, I'm unrepentant about that. But whatever, people like what they like, even if I find, particularly, you know, in like that stupid thing, video game thing where, oh, the less armor the female character wears, the better her defensive stats. That always bugged the bubbling shit out of me. But it is what it is, and you know, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to tell people what they can and can't enjoy. Whatever my own feelings on the matter. Let me just quick check a few things before the boss fight. Okay, so Jackson, the Rabbit Man, gets picked up by a couple of guys who are clearly working for Valance. He wants to know about this boy and the droid that poor old Don Quixote rambled about before his death. And of course, you know, Jackson would rather die than sell out men and women that he fought side by side with. And so he refuses to tell, even when they try to use this torture device on his ears. Luckily for him, Amaza, who by this point has sort of become his partner in spacing, whatever sort of business that entails, arrives and manages to save him. Unfortunately, right after Jackson's heroic effort of keeping silent, because he thinks that when they mention the boy and his droid, obviously he thinks they're referring to Jim and Effie, you know, the late lamented Effie, and of course that's when sorry, lost track there. He refuses to tell. Amaza saves him, kills most of them. Unfortunately, one's still alive, and she mentions Aduba 3 in his hearing, and just then he manages to escape. So, of course, now the Rabbit Man and Amaza know that their former colleague in heroism is in danger, and they need to get to Aduba 3 before the bad guys do. And again, I know you're probably all wondering, what the hell does this have to do with Luke, Han, and the rest of the gang? And I can only reiterate that this chapter is specifically set up. It's not even setting up for something that's going to be talked about in this video, but it's clearly some kind of arc that occurs much later in the comic. Anyway, as it happens... Oh, what's this? Maybe I haven't played enough video games. Oh, the skimpy armor equals more defense thing. Is it more a thing in Eastern games? I don't know. Oh, maybe it's just not as common as it is. Maybe it's just not as common today, but especially like in the early 2000s, since there was and in fact, it was very sort of popular enough in certain games, like particularly like RPGs and stuff, because it was all about getting higher level armor and stuff. But I think like around the 2010s, especially once feminists started writing articles and Gamergate was taking off, that sort of came under greater scrutiny, and that I guess it became less common after that. So I'm not much of a gamer myself, but I sort of saw a lot of stuff going on with internet history and culture at the time. So maybe I'm off the mark, but I do recall it being this particular aspect of certain game genres being very common up until the 2010s. I just said that I'm a prude, but I'm not for if someone wants a game where they go full all in on the exploitation and stuff. That's if people want to consume that sort of media, people want to make that kind of media, that's fine. It's just not something I would purchase. Unlike the people that really complained about this in the 2010s, I don't believe in dictating to others what kind of entertainment they can and cannot consume, barring child pornography, obviously. Oof. Getting off that dark little subject. Next, Jackson and Amaza managed to make it to Aduba 3 ahead of the bad guys, and so they're able to warn Jim, who's who's decided to settle down. And in fact, things move fast on this planet. He's already married his hometown sweetheart, and they're expecting their first. So either quite a few months have passed since the events of the first story arc of the comic, or they just move real fast on Aduba 3. But anyway, they get the warning out, so the farmers are able to lay an ambush for Valance and his mercs. And around here is where we start getting a little bit of Valance's story, and his big hatred of droids. And it is... Let's see now. Here we go. Yes. So, Valance was originally an Imperial Stormtrooper officer. However, he was gravely injured in a fight against the rebellion. And Telos 4, that's the name. Yes, I finally got the number, at least. And that it was from the injury that he ended up going to Telos 4. But the injuries were so severe, or apparently, though they're not described yet, that he was no longer able to return to active duty as a stormtrooper. And that doesn't explain quite yet how he hates droids so much. Oh, well, yes, that comes a little bit later, because even though, the Empire was done with him, he still felt a certain degree of loyalty to it. And some point later, he found out about the destruction of the Death Star. And the part that really started getting his blood boiling was the fact that, one, Luke was the guy who did it, and the reason why that matters is because he learned from these tapes that he swiped off of this rebel spy that his men killed, that Luke is very good friends with a certain iconic duo of droids. And so, given Valance's intense hatred towards all synthetic life, well, he is determined to hunt down Luke Skywalker and kill him. Not the strongest motivation, but it's at least a bit more than can be said for some Star Wars villains. At least it's clear. Unfortunately for Val, so of course that's why he's going to Aduba 3. He thinks that, Don Juan Quixote, I should say, not to be confused with the literary character, his rantings about the boy and his droid, right? And because he mentioned Han Solo as well in his delirium, Valance thought the old man was referring to Luke Skywalker. And so he figures Luke has to be on Aduba 3. I'm going to hunt that droid lover down and I'm going to kill him. Yeah. Explosions. More explosions. Unfortunately for Valance, this does not go well for him. It seems that the farmers learned the lessons from being attacked by the Cloud Riders. And Valance severely underestimates his opponents because Jackson, Ameza, and the farmers managed to best him. And they end up killing pretty much all of his men, mostly by triggering a herd of banthas into a stampede. And then, gunning down the shell-shocked survivors. Because, at this point, I think the good folks of Aduba 3 have learned the hard way that there are some folks you just can't afford to show mercy to. Ooh, gotta find cover. There we are. And that's pretty much it. Valance is the only survivor. And it's only after that he learns that he's been chasing after the wrong guy. Jim is not Luke. And so he's pretty pissed, but also kind of a half amused, half pissed at himself that he got it all wrong and that he got all of his men killed on what was a wild goose chase. Then he somehow pulls a fast one and manages to get off another shot. That forces everybody else to duck and run for cover, giving him enough time to get back to his ship. Yeah. And so we sort of leave behind Jackson, Ameza, and Jim and the good farmers of Aduba 3. And Chapter 16 ends with an interesting twist. It turns out that those severe injuries that Valance suffered as a stormtrooper and necessitated him going to Telos 4 for medical treatment, turns out they were so severe that he required cybernetic enhancement replacements. It's actually a pretty good reveal at the very end where it's like he shows that his hand is metal and that that extra shot he got off was because he had a gun built into his cyborg arm. And like half his face is metal, like the it's like full-on Terminator sort of look, even though this kind of predates the Terminator. And it's an interesting twist, and really gives an interesting wrinkle onto his hatred of droids when, thanks to his past, he himself is half, technically by his own standards, half droid. It's also one of the reasons why when he went to Telos 4, he destroyed the records. He wanted to destroy any evidence of him being a cyborg, because for whatever reason, he wants to keep that, obviously, he wants to keep that a secret. It'd be kind of hard for him to really sell himself as an upstanding hater of synthetics, even if he actually is, if, people know he's half machine himself. And so, it's nothing too spectacular, but still a pretty interesting setup. And it's pretty clear that they've demonstrated that that when he's not blinded by his hatred of droids and his obsession, he can be very competent and very deadly, and very ruthless too. But alas, he does not appear yet in the storyline involving, Luke and the droids. That apparently is much later, and we'll have to wait for a future stream. Okay, so we getting back to it. We now come to the other sort of one-issue short story of the run, issue number 17. Just a quick check. The credits. Okay, yes. Archie Goodwin is still the writer-editor. Herb Triempe. Oh, God, I hope... I'm just going to be butchering all these names tonight. And Alan Milgram as the guest artist. But interestingly enough, Chris Claremont of X-Men fame is credited as plot. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. I'm not a comic book aficionado, and I would have thought that, as the writer, Archie Goodwin would be doing the plot. If anybody can explain that to me, I'd most appreciate it. I do try to keep a track of the comments section, even as I'm trying to keep track of what I'm saying and what I'm playing. But yeah, Chris Claremont. Again, I'm not a big comic aficionado, and I mostly learned this from Dan Torrey when we did that mutual promotion stream for our respective comic projects. Me for Babylon Rocker and his for Star Spangled Tales. I'm actually going to write an article about Star Spangled Tales for Iron Age Media pretty soon, because I think it's genuinely good. And if you like horror and history, I think it's a comic series worth going after. If you can... I don't know exactly his website's name. I'll have to ask him about that. But anyway, getting off topic. Yeah, Chris Claremont... he didn't invent the concept of the X-Men. That was Stan Lee and Kirby. But according to Dan, Claremont was sort of the guy who made X-Men what it is and made it popular. And he wrote in all of the sort of the famous X-Men storylines. Of course, the only one that I'm familiar with is, of course, the Dark Phoenix saga, because, every X-Men adaptation from the cartoons to the movies has to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga. Okay, so anyway, Chapter 17, the one-off. We begin with Luke sort of half musing, half daydreaming in the cockpit of the Falcon. And this little comic is actually a bit of a backstory for Luke. And this is kind of interesting because it actually makes references to things that were originally in the script for A New Hope, but ultimately had to be cut out for the sake of runtime. Because like anyone who's seen New Hope, you know that despite the fact that Luke is the protagonist, he doesn't show up until, 20 minutes into the film? And it's one of those weird things about Star Wars that's sometimes talked about, but not much, because actually I don't know why, because it is a very odd thing to not have your protagonist introduced from the start. It's very, maybe not weird is the right word, maybe uncommon is preferable. I mean, because there's nothing wrong with it if you can do it right, and clearly they did it right, because no one really complains about that. But anyway, it's sort of I'm guessing a few years ago. Well, yeah, about a couple of years ago, because this takes place around the time that Biggs Darklighter, Luke's good friend, who alas died at the hands of Vader during the Battle of Yavin, was going off to the Imperial Academy to become a pilot. That dream that he and every other farm boy on Tatooine had. Because let's face it, no one of any but under the age of 20 he wanted to live out his days as a moisture farmer on a dusty, out in the boonies rock like Tatooine. Of course, we do feature Uncle Owen complaining about Luke not sort of slacking off on his chores, and the idea that he thinks wanting to go off and be a pilot is foolish, and that it would be better if he stayed and managed the farm and, as the way Owen sees it, makes something of himself. Of course, as typical, Aunt Beru is more sympathetic to Luke. And apparently the occasion is that Biggs is about to go to the academy, and Luke and all their friends are going to have a bit of a farewell party to celebrate and sort of say goodbye. Got to pause a bit here because there's an interesting little bit of dialogue here between Beru and Luke, and it really does again drive home how much the Marvel Star Wars comic is a artifact of that time before The Empire Strikes Back was made. Because let me see if I can find the exact lines. Okay, so yeah, it's right after Owen grudgingly lets Luke go to the farewell party, and Luke says, "Gee, I never figured Uncle Owen would give in. What happened between him and my father?" There. And there's a bit earlier where Beru is talking to Owen, and basically she says, quote, "You let a brother leave without saying goodbye." And that's kind of interesting because, as we all know, at least, though I'm sure the prequel haters are going to start gnashing their teeth over this one. Now, where is the boss? Ah, there he is. Owen, Lars's father, for those who haven't seen the prequels, Owen Lars's dad freed Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's father, from slavery and married her. And so, I believe that Lars was not Shmi's son. He was from his dad's previous marriage, but that first mother died. And so, in a kind of funny way, he and Anakin became stepbrothers. But here, obviously, Beru explicitly refers to Luke's father as Lars's brother. And again, it sort of drives home how this was before Empire Strikes Back and before a lot of the idea, when Lucas still didn't quite yet know what he was going to do with Star Wars. I mean, famously, like I mentioned how a lot of the folks at Marvel, the higher-ups, were unconvinced that Star Wars was going to work. Lucas wasn't all that convinced it would succeed. At best, he figured it would be enough to start a very low-budget sequel at best. He was not expecting it to take off the way it did, and it was, in fact, because Star Wars took off so much, did so well, insanely well, that suddenly Lucas realized, oh, wow, I can forget the low-budget sequel, I can do a high-budget sequel with this, and I can do a lot more, and that's sort of where, because of that, all of that stuff, the revelation of Vader being Luke's dad, pretty much the expanded universe as a whole exists as it does because Star Wars exceeded pretty much everyone's expectations. Even people like Roy Thomas, who was convinced that it would succeed, I doubt even he suspected just how big Star Wars was going to get. And so it is kind of interesting, and just like when I mentioned this in my Splinter of the Mind's Eye video, it is fascinating, genuinely fascinating, to look at some of these old 70s era Star Wars storylines and see the artifacts of something that would be kind of left behind, particularly after Empire Strikes Back. Let me just get back on track to where I was. Okay, yes. So, Luke, before he goes off to, Biggs's farewell party, he repairs his Skyhopper for, his little, what's it called? His T-16, the one that he bullseyes Womp Rats in back home. And he sort of daydreams, very much like what he would like to be doing, because as much as he does love and respect his aunt and uncle, there's just a part of him that cannot accept that this will be his life. Even though at one point he actually says to Beru, that maybe he does just need to grow up. Maybe his desire to leave home and go among the stars is just the remnant of a childish ambition, showing his lack of maturity and all that. So that's sort of the thing with Luke in this one-off storyline, that he has doubts. He still wants it, but he's not sure if it's right for him to want to become a pilot, because he does, his aunt and uncle are the only family that he's ever known, and they've raised him and tried to teach him what it is to be a good person, and he feels obligation to that, and he's reluctant to abandon them. Even and we see this even in A New Hope. For all that he complains about wanting to leave Tatooine, the moment that right after he sees the message from Leia in Ben Kenobi's hut, and Ben says, "You must learn the ways of the Force if you are to come with me to Alderaan." So there it is, Luke's adventure that or the chance to leave Tatooine that he's wanted, and yet automatically he does that classic John Campbell refusal of the call. Because, there is the obligation to his family and his and so it's clearly establishing, and so it still is going. So this comic is sort of playing off of that part, because like the early Marvel, they did have access to like George Lucas's script, so they kind of knew something. Because the very first few issues, the ones that I've not talked about, like the first issues 1 through 6 are just a comic adaptation of A New Hope, and that's obviously the reason why I didn't talk about it, because there'd be no point. It's A New Hope. But anyway, yeah, Luke is daydreaming. Basically, everything he wants to be. He wants to be Commander Skywalker, the brave, daring hero who saves the day. Hey, and like he has this daydream about him taking out a bunch of slavers, and rescuing a fair damsel. And of course, and so even though he does feel obligation to his family, there is still the part of him that wants to leave. It's like, again, it's sort of a longer version of that famous scene, the Binary Sunset scene, where just the way that Mark Hamill looks at the double sunset shows you just how much he wants more than what his uncle wants for him. So anyway, enough of that meandering. We get to the farewell party, and because, all of these people are hotshot pilots, or the friends of hotshot pilots, the main event of Biggs's, going away celebration is a skyhopper race through Beggar's Canyon. Ooh, squeaked a bit, that one. And so, it's sort of the classic thing that all, young boys do. They egg each other on to do more, take a more dangerous route through the canyon, tighter turns, more risks. It's all good fun. Even as, Luke is feeling sad that Biggs is going away. Because, that's one less friend he has back on Tatooine. And a funny thing, because I mentioned before that this comic includes things that were cut out of the film, that were never even re-included back into the special edition. But you can find this in the novelization of A New Hope that was written by Alan Dean Foster, where there's a scene where like Luke spots the Star Destroyer attacking the Tantive 4 up in orbit, and he runs into Anchorhead. And let me quickly find the names, just making absolutely sure. Yes, there are a couple of characters that he interacts with, like Deke and Windy. These are characters that were originally in the script, sort of friends of Luke's. I believe either Deke or Windy was a mechanic, and that was and that sort of plays into like Luke wanting to get those power converters and stuff. And so, yeah, it really is interesting, sort of the little weird artifacts that you sometimes find in these older bits of Star Wars media. And so, of course, everybody's having a blast. Biggs wins the Skyhopper race this go around, which no one begrudges him that. I mean, he's good enough to qualify for the Imperial Academy. Of course, this is before he ends up jumping ship to join the rebellion. And in fact, that was another scene that was omitted from the movie. There was actually a whole scene where Luke was going to talk to Biggs, and Biggs was going to reveal that as soon as now that he'd graduated, the first chance he got, he was going to ditch the Empire and go join the rebellion. But anyway, the festivities are interrupted by a bunch of Tusken Raiders. Hold on. Somebody screwed with one of their sacred sites, and by somebody I mostly mean smugglers. And of course, Sand People, never the most patient of sentience under normal circumstances, they basically decided, well, that tears it. We're going to go on a vengeance spree. Pretty much any moisture farmer within range of our banthas and our weapons is dead. And in fact, our heroes learn of this when some guy shows up injured, almost crashing his ship because he was trying to warn all the settlements of the impending attack. And of course, right as he says that, the Sand People show up and start shooting. And so, all these hotshot spacers and their friends have to defend themselves against the Sand People assault. And, or at least what they really need to do is they need to basically get the news out so that the settlements and the farmers can ready themselves. Sand People are in that typical sense are the kind of raiders that won't attack unless they have all the advantages on their side. And the fact that their targets will have warning of their coming is definitely the sort of thing that they would not be very keen on having to deal with, an enemy that's ready for them. They would, and if they can warn the farmers, the Sand People will be that much more reluctant to take on the good folks of Tatooine. The ones who didn't screw with their holy site, because Sand People apparently don't often make the distinction between the actual perpetrators and innocent bystanders. Biggs and Luke run for the nearest skyhoppers so they can take off and warn them and warn the communities. But alas, Biggs gets injured by a poisoned gaffy stick that's thrown at him like a javelin. So Luke has to do the flying. And so, of course, they have to go through Beggar's Canyon. They have to take the shortest route possible because, again, time is of the essence. They've got to warn people. Oh, all the deleted stuff is in the audio drama. I should have thought of that because I know that those exist. Should have thought of that. Thank you for reminding me. So anyway, shortest route, time is of the essence. But the problem is the shortest route is, of course, the most dangerous. It's called Diablo Cut. And, no one has ever managed to make it all the way through Diablo Cut without crashing their ship. So, but now, of course, since if they don't get back in time, a lot of dead people are going to happen. Luke decides, well, he's got to be the first to actually pull it off. And of course, Luke is our hero. He does. Very narrowly, he manages to make his way through the Diablo Cut, and manages to get to his uncle's farm homestead and get Biggs some medical attention and sort of get the warning out about the incoming raid. Though, of course, he ends up crashing the Skyhopper, though, not into the Diablo Cut. It's afterwards. And I really do. The part I like the most about this little one-off story is the way that it ends. And I gotta pause because this is going to require me reading directly from the comics, so I apologize. Twilight. It is over. With the militia's arrival, the Tusken Raiders are swiftly turned back into the Junland wastes. And the panel shows again Luke staring at the two sunsets because this is something he does a lot, not just in the film. Luke stands alone, thinking of Diablo Cut, of the way he somehow reached deep within himself there and did the impossible. Because again, no one's made it through the Diablo Cut before. He was the first, and of course, anyone who's seen the film, we know he's got the Force on his side. This may well be the first time that he's used it. And Luke says, it was almost like some kind of test of whatever else comes out of today, I feel like I passed it. And the narrator says, and with that passing, Luke knows He can never be a farmer. He has briefly touched the stuff of his dreams and found them possible. Somehow, some way, he knows he must reach out again. And of course he will, reluctantly at first, as events beyond his home planet conspire to sweep him into the greatest adventure of all. An adventure which reaches a chilling height with the Battle of the Death Star, but one which still continues even now, continues and grows. And I love this part because right when the narrator talks about sweeping him into the greatest adventure, the whole next page is just a montage of shots from A New Hope. The message from Leia, his first lightsaber lessons with Obi-Wan, the burnt homestead, escaping on the Falcon, escaping the Death Star, flying down the trench in that final battle and the Death Star blowing up. And I freely admit, when I looked at that page, as hokey as this comic often is, and as sometimes cheesily dated as it is, when I saw that page and went through that, the Binary Sunset theme started playing in my head, and I thought, yeah, this is good stuff, Marvel. It's like for a brief moment, Marvel Star Wars 1977 went from feeling dated to feeling classic for just that moment. It really is a great chapter, and if you can find Marvel, the old Marvel comic, I would recommend just reading that particular issue. It really is good Star Wars in my opinion. Especially the deleted scene with Biggs. Yeah, I think I do too, because it does sort of flesh out Biggs and Luke's friendship and sort of gives a bit more weight to his death during the Death Star battle. But I think I can understand why they left it out, because it one of the things that people who, especially if you watch reaction channels who talk about who watch Star Wars: A New Hope for the first time, the thing they always compliment so highly is the pacing. Because even though the film is I think between an hour and a half to 2 hours, they always say that it doesn't feel that way. You never feel its length. And that's because its pacing is damn near perfect. And unfortunately, if they had left that scene in, that's very expository scene with Luke and Biggs, it would have kind of damaged that pacing. So, the sacrifices that one makes for good entertaining media. So anyway, yeah, that's the two one-off storylines. One that's literally is just a one-off in itself. The other that's sort of setting up this Valance guy. Pardon me. To be some future antagonist. And so we come to what is going to take up the rest of this stream. And I call it the Wheel arc. Because its main setting is going to involve the Wheel, now, which is sort of a famous gambling space station. Now, those of you who have seen the Knights of the Old Republic special that I did earlier this year, where I covered both the games and the comic, the sort of prequel comic, one of the story arcs features the protagonist being on a giant wheel-like space station that's used for sports betting, essentially. And John Jackson Miller, the writer of KOTOR the comic, has gone on record saying that this station was a deliberate homage to the Wheel from Marvel Star Wars 1977. And I believe I said this in the previous stream, I can appreciate a good tribute. So, okay, we're now on issue 18. It's going to be issues 18 through, let me quickly check. I think, yes, issues 18 through 23. So this story arc takes about 6 issues. And let me just quickly check the credits. Stan Lee presents Star Wars. Yep, because Stan Lee's got to have his name somewhere involved. So, okay, Archie Goodwin is still the writer. Carmine Infantino and Gene Day are the artists. Apparently Chris Claremont is no longer involved here. And again, I want, if someone can, kindly explained what that was all about in like the previous one, where they mentioned Chris Claremont as being the guy in charge of plot. How is that how is that different from, you know, the writer, which was, you know, Archie Goodwin's job? Just another quick check of things. Okay, so yeah. So after 2 issues of our main heroes being a no-show, we finally are back to seeing the Millennium Falcon. And we pretty much open up on Crisis as Luke was apparently trying a Jedi meditation trick when he suddenly just went completely unconscious and will not wake up. C-3PO keeps saying that Master Luke is shut down, even though that makes no sense. That's a droid term. Doesn't really apply to organics. But that's really the best frame of reference that 3PO has to describe his master's plight. So obviously, they need to get some kind of medical attention. To get Luke some kind of medical attention. Unfortunately, that soon becomes the least of their worries, as they are harassed by some TIE fighters who say that they have entered some Imperial military containment zone. So basically, a place that they're not allowed to be, and if they don't surrender, the Empire will just shoot them. Because, you know, they're not going to let them go. The Empire is not exactly known for a catch-and-release policy, if you know what I mean. Oh, God, I hate those things. Teleporting everywhere. Of course, you know, it's the Millennium Falcon, and Han Solo is at the wheel, so it's not like we have to worry too much about our heroes getting caught. Pardon me. Gotta check again. Huh. And soon they find, yes, they find at least some clue as to why the Empire is being more hostile than usual. They stumble across a derelict merchant ship that has been recently attacked. And, well, you know, it's wreckage. Though exactly what the Empire wants with a wreck like that, again, remains a mystery. However, they do manage to recover a survivor from the wreck, and it turns out he's with the rebellion. And he reveals before he dies, because, you know, because, you know, severe injuries, and he was deliberately set out to die. The Empire captured him and his fellow rebels and stuffed them aboard the merchant ship and then blew it up so as to make it look like this was a rebel attack. So basically this is a kind of psyop. Empire trying to paint the rebellion as the bad guys in the eyes of the wider galaxy. And it's here that we're introduced to one of our principal antagonists, Imperial Commander Strong, the guy in charge of the task force that's been setting up this derelict, this psyop thing. And that's, of course, the reason why the Imperials are determined to not let the Falcon escape with its crew alive, because they can't very well have any witnesses reveal what's actually going on here. That, you know, the Empire is deliberately trying to frame the rebellion. However, it seems at first that our heroes have a bit of a stroke of luck. First of all, Han manages to outfly the Imperials, because of course he does, it's Han Solo. But then, it turns out that where they are is nearby to the Wheel, a giant space station casino. Now, the thing about the wheel is that there's a special arrangement between the guys who run the guy who runs the wheel and with the Empire, that the Empire will not directly involve itself, including in the wheel's affairs, including not setting foot on the station without express permission of the administrator, as long as the wheel hands over a cut of the profits it makes from gambling to the Empire. So, you know, standard. You don't mess with me, I don't mess with you too much. Because, you know, the Empire, because it turns out the wheel provides a lot of money to the Empire from its, you know, its gambling run. And gamblers might get scared away if the Empire decides to try and take direct control of the wheel. And so better that it remain a private institution in an alignment with the Empire rather than directly controlled by them. I gotta pause again because there's this great little bit of exchange between Leia and Han. First off, the way they present the wheel is great. It gets a full panel to itself and sort of backlit by the nearby sun. Very good. And anyway, Leia and Han have very, very different reactions to the sight of the wheel. Yeah. Well, Leia says, "My father fought the building of this place when he was a senator. It's degrading, it's barbaric, Han cuts in, "It's the ultimate gambling place, princess. The stakes are high, but most galactic citizens wouldn't have it any other way." So, you know, you can tell exactly where these two diverge in their moral priorities. But anyway, precisely because, you know, the Empire is not really allowed to be on the wheel, Han figures that the wheel can serve as a kind of ad hoc sanctuary. And hey, they've got medical facilities. Maybe they can get help for Luke. Unfortunately, and so far it seems to work, because the Falcon just flies right on in with Strom and his Imperials in hot pursuit. But of course this causes trouble for the commander, because by directly following them in without even talking to the administrator of the wheel, he is in breach of the agreement. Ooh, wow. That died surprisingly easy. Those guys are usually a pain in the ass to kill. Well, but anyway, the Strom apparently is one of those guys who really doesn't think much of people who are aligned with the Empire but are independent of it. And so he just decides to hell with that and, you know, this silly agreement. We're going to follow the rebels because, you know, we've got to kill them. Han and Leia have no choice but to split up. And so Han and Chewie go one way, the droids go the other with Luke. Leia goes yet another way by herself, and they basically all agree to meet up in a place called the Crimson Casino, one of the wheel's many, many gambling establishments. And here we are introduced to, Administrator Greyshade, the other principal antagonist of the Wheel arc. A former and very corrupt Imperial Senator. Because if you recall, Palpatine dissolved the Imperial Senate shortly before the events of A New Hope. Yeah, and I still love that line from Tarkin where he says, as a follow-up to that, "The last remnants of the old Republic have now been swept away." Peter Cushing really was a treasure as far as actors go. Oh, there's actually this funny little story that apparently the boots he had to wear as Tarkin were so uncomfortable because for whatever reason, I guess they weren't sized properly or whatever. And so he basically asked permission from George Lucas if he could just be shot from the chest up. There's only like one brief scene where Cushing is wearing the boots, and that's, I think, in the right before when he gives the order to fire on Yavin 4, or is it Alderaan? Whichever one, it's like a brief 1 second or so shot from a distance, and that was it. Apart from that, the rest of the shooting of A New Hope, all the other scenes he was in, he would be shot from the chest up, and he was in fact wearing some bath slippers that George Lucas loaned him. Because, you know, he can't very well, you know, be barefoot or in socks on a I guess that's what you would call it, a sound stage. I don't know filming terminology. But yeah, it is sort of a really funny thing to imagine Grand Moff Tarkin in bath slippers. So, okay, yes, Senator Greyshade. Corrupt bad guy. Right. The other main character that we're introduced to is Master Com. Essentially, it's the computer that basically does a lot of the running of the station, of the wheel station itself. But apparently, Greyshade doesn't like talking to like a wall or a faceless monitor, so he decided to give Master Com a droid body. And there's actually this really weird scene. I can't recall. I don't know exactly where it is, but Master Com basically is like relaying instructions to other parts of the station, and it seems like the switches is that he like operates these little switches to start broadcasting the message, but the switches are on his droid body's chest where his nipples ought to be, and it's like, Mr. and Mrs. Marvel artist people, do you have something you'd like to share with the rest of the world, I wonder? It's unintentionally amusing in that regard. But obviously, you know, Greyshade objects to Strom basically just barging into his station, because he's the guy who runs the wheel without, you know, his permission and in complete violation of his agreement with the agreement with the Empire. Strom, of course, tries to, you know, the typical soldier's contempt for a civilian, especially given that, you know, now that the Senate's gone, Greyshade isn't even a senator anymore. Or he's pretty much just he's a private citizen. And, you know, as is typical with stereotypical soldiers, even those that aren't villains, there's always a certain that kind of archetype always has a certain degree of contempt for anyone who isn't also military. Okay, let me just quick cheap check. We still on the same artist. Instant team. Oh, how lovely. It's still most the same, but Bob Wiaszek, these East European names, is back helping Miss Infantine, or is it Mr. Carmine Infantino? Is Carmine a guy's name or a girl's name? I'd really like to avoid that kind of obvious mistake. But yeah, basically the whole story from this point forward takes place on the wheel. Greyshade and Strom basically each try to, you know, assert authority over each other, while the droids try to find medical attention for Luke. Han, Leia, and Chewie try to avoid getting caught. Oh, excuse me. And pretty much that's the whole arc here. It's pretty much like, but then shenanigans happens, and it's like several times it happens. Like Chewie, Chewie starts a fight in the casino where he was supposed to meet up with the others, and he gets roped into one of the many things that people bet on at the wheel, which apparently is gladiatorial combat. And and in some versions, it's literally to the death. Meanwhile, Leia eventually gets caught. Well, Leia and Han get caught. Han basically gets thrown into a cell for a little while Leia is brought to a meeting with the nefarious ex-Senator Greyshade. And of course, you know, they have the classic argument between the politician who was actually principled and tried to do the right thing versus the unrepentantly corrupt politician who was only ever out for himself. And of course, because it has to be this way, Grayshade has a bit of a thing for Leia, and of course, she has nothing but contempt for him for all the obvious reasons. Now, of course, he doesn't tell Strom that he's brought Leia to his office, and Strom discovers this, and he tries to basically say, "Ha! You're basically not you're not imprisoning a rebel leader. You must be in. I have enough grounds to accuse you of collusion, and therefore, what right do you have to tell me what to do?" And Grayshade basically pulls the, my dear commander, how lacking in vision you are. And I think afterwards he basically proposes a scheme to Strom. Hold on a second. Gotta pause again to check on that, something. Yes. There we go. Huh. No, that's not quite right. Sorry, folks. This is taking a little longer than I thought it was going to be. Okay, there we are. Okay, yes. Sorry, folks. Had to refresh my memory. Oh, Carmine is a guy's name. God, because I think I've been referring to him as a she in the previous video because he did art for I think the Drexel arc at least. Gods, don't I feel like an ass? Oh well. What's done is done. So anyway, Grayshade. So before Strom barges in, Leia does reveal what the Empire is up to, because it turns out specifically the merchant ship that was hit belonged to the House of Tag, which may be a reference to Commander Tag, one of the Imperial officers in the famous Darth Vader choking scene. And he's not the guy that gets choked by Vader, that's Mahdi. In fact, Tag was the guy who was basically like, well, the rebellion may be more dangerous than you realize. The guy who was worried about just how much of a threat the rebellion could be to the Empire, even small and disorganized as they are. So, this is an important and prominent aristocratic family that is also a backer of the Empire. Things could get very awkward if the House of Tag finds out that the Empire destroyed one of their own ships just so that they could use it as a frame-up for the rebellion. And so Leia manages to inform Grayshade of this before Tag bursts in, Strom bursts in. Strom. And so Grayshade offers Strom a deal. So I will keep quiet about your underhanded dealings, your psyop thing with the House of Tag merchant ship. In exchange, let me make sure I got the deal right. Yes, he will keep the secret, and in exchange, he will dispose of Leia Han and, all the other members of the Millennium Falcon crew 4 strong, because he still doesn't want the Empire running the show on his station. And so, better, he feels better that I handle that myself. And so that's basically what happens. That's sort of the scheme. Chewie, as we already know, is basically forced into a gladiatorial match, so that's already taken care of. Han gets released, and he decides to try and he tries to gamble his way into enough money to possibly pay for the docking fees at the wheel, because they landed in a hurry, and because Han had all of his money that the rebels gave him taken by Crimson Jack back in the previous story arc, he doesn't have a credit to his name. Or I should say, barely any credits to his name. He's got enough that he can maybe think he can win some money at the gambling tables, but unfortunately Gray Shade has had it all rigged so that Han will lose. So he even at one point tries to pawn. He actually pawns the droids as a collateral. Poor R2 and 3PO, and they only learned this as after they found a medical facility to treat Luke in. So, not exactly a pleasant surprise by any means. And of course, because Luke is basically comatose still, Gray Shade sort of arranges things so that Luke is basically going to die. He will never awaken from his coma or leave, the medical slab where he's being treated. And, we still have no idea why he's in this comatose state. But of course, there is the question of Princess Leia. As I said earlier, Gray Shade has a bit of a thing for Leia, as quite a few nefarious Star Wars villains do. In the very last stream, the very first official stream I did, where I roasting the Jedi Prince, Trioculus wanted to marry Leia and make her his Queen of the Empire. Ooh boy, what a funny bad ride the Jedi Prince was. But anyway, Gray Shade is a little reluctant to execute Leia along with her friends. But so far, otherwise, everything is going according to plan. And Han ends up so much in debt because he loses all his money. His only chance to win anything is to actually enter the same gladiatorial game as Chewie. So he has to gamble his very life in this instance. Let's check out. The droids are forced to they're stuck somewhere in a holding cell. Because now they are technically the property of the wheel, since Han basically put them up as collateral in his gambling things. And of course, the bad guys are planning to mind wipe them so that they can use them as menials. Because what else would Star Wars bad guys want to do with our favorite synthetic duo, I should say, Drat. However, though, the droids actually receive help from an unexpected quarter, Mastercom, the droid/master computer in charge of the wheel's systems. Because it seems that when Gray Shade gave Mastercom his droid body, it was something of a liberation for Mastercom, because he's basically an AI. So he sort of has an awareness of his, like a very powerful kind of AI, like HAL 9000 style AI, only without the murderous intent. And you know, he has access to all the security cameras, and he's seen like the two droids fretting over their beloved Master Luke. And this has led Master Comm to start contemplating the ideas of loyalty and friendship. Yep. And you know, at this point, the closest thing he has to a friend, if you can call him that, is Senator Greyshade, ex-Senator Greyshade, the man who gave him his body, and you know, thus a means to interact with the universe, other than simply as a, you know, like a computer program. AM from I have, you know, basically it's what AM from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream would have wanted. Because like that's the whole thing. Like the in that little short story, AM can't do anything, even though he has like godlike power and knowledge. There's nothing he can do with it because he just wasn't built or programmed to have the means to use it. And it's one of the reasons that he's so pissed off and why he tortures all of the characters in I Have No Mouth. Getting off that tangent. And so Master Comm, it seems, is kind of touched by 3PO and R2's care for Luke, and he actually decides to let them go without because he wants to study them further. And he has a workaround for this because obviously Greyshade didn't give him permission. But when Master Comm asked if he could have permission to study and observe the two droids, Greyshade did not give him permission to do so. He didn't forbid him. And so, you know, that kind of classic verbal loophole. Master Comm was able to take advantage of that to let R2 and 3PO go. Sorry, I gotta pause again, check up something, make sure I'm up to speeds. So yeah, you know, Han and Chewie fighting for their lives in the the gladiatorial games, but of course, you know, Han's very good in a fight because, you know, being a smuggler with the law and, you know, other criminals on his tail, he has to be. And Chewie's a Wookiee, and a lot of the combat in the gladiatorial games is melee combat. And like I think in one of the earlier parts of the comic, it says there's an old Spacers joke that goes, "What do you call someone who goes to fight a Wookiee barehanded? Dead." Now, you know, obviously no one's barehanded in these gladiatorial games, but in many ways, when it comes to melee combat, the rules, I think that the joke still applies. Yes, that's a box. Meanwhile, you know, Greyshade takes his sweet time about executing Leia, all the while trying to, I guess, seduce her. And, you know, Strom is no fool. He kind of starting to notice that, and he's becoming increasingly suspicious of whether or not he can really rely on Greyshade to hold up his end of the bargain. One last thing to look at before that. Oops, drat. That's something screwed up for a brief moment. Because while all this is going on, we then cut to Darth Vader, of all people. Because, well, tangentially anyway. Because, no, I'm sorry, I misspoke. We cut to back to Luke because after. Okay, good. The stream's still going. I thought I screwed up royally for a moment there. After Master Comm helps the droids escape, they go back to look for Luke, only to find that even though he was comatose, strapped to a medical slab, there's no sign of him. Either he's been taken, or he somehow managed to regain consciousness and left. But where, and to, and why? Okay. And at last, we sort of see what's been going on in Luke's head and how he ended up in the comatose situation that he was. When he was meditating, he was confronted by an image of terrible fear. And like that, because, well, in the midst of his meditation, because he sensed something. It's not revealed just yet what it is. And even though the spirit of Ben Kenobi appears to him, telling him to trust in the Force, and that he need not be afraid, that he needs to like turn around and fight whatever he's running from in his own head, Luke is unable to completely overcome his fear. Of course, you know, Ben tries to reassure him. The old, everybody feels afraid, but courage is in facing it. You know, that old chestnut. But Luke still can't quite bring himself to face what he is fleeing. And it turns out what he's fleeing is a vision of Darth Vader. You know, at last, with some coaching from Ben, Luke is finally able to overcome his fear, confronts the specter of Vader in his mind, and at the same time that he frees his mind from his own self-imposed imprisonment, and by drawing upon the Force, he basically temporarily gains enough super strength to destroy his restraints. And that's basically how he left the medical facility. Luke Skywalker has regained consciousness and is acting under his own power again. So, some bit of good news, if nothing else. He does manage to relink up with the droids and with Leia. Of course, now they have to... because Leia's managed to escape from Senator Greyshade. I completely forgot to mention that earlier. Sorry, guys. And so now what they need to do is rescue Han. And it's at this point that at last we cut to Darth Vader. Because the fear that made Luke retreat into his own mind to the point that he sort of entered a coma, when he was meditating and like expanding his consciousness out through the Force, he sensed Darth Vader's presence, and that malevolence is what made him so afraid that he pretty much like shut down his own mind. Because, you know, Luke's new at this whole Jedi game. And of course, this is well before The Empire Strikes Back. He hasn't had any guidance from Yoda. So he's literally still winging it at this stage. With, you know, Ben Kenobi only showing up now and again to give him advice from beyond the grave. But anyway, Vader. Because Vader is fairly nearby. Because Vader is hunting down that mysterious rebel with the Force, whoever it was, because, you know, he doesn't know about Luke. He doesn't know Luke's name yet, and he doesn't know that, you know, he's his son. And of course, this is before Empire Strikes Back, so they haven't even established the idea that, you know, Luke and Vader are related. But, you know, this rebel pilot evaded him. And so, you know, Vader wants vengeance. Because, you know, obviously he had to be the one to go back and report the Death Star's destruction to the Emperor, because he was the only one who survived. And as you can imagine, I doubt Palpatine received that news very kindly. In fact, I think in one of the Thrawn trilogy books where Mara Jade mentions that the Emperor took off of one of Vader's arms for the failure. You know, his failure to stop the Death Star from being destroyed. So anyway, Vader happens to be nearby at a rebel outpost. And he's basically, again, he's hunting for the mysterious rebel because he senses that he's nearby, but he doesn't have a bead on Luke. He doesn't know exactly where he is. Darn it, gotta check this again. And it's because as Vader is sifting, but it turns out Vader has arrived at this rebel outpost and found all the rebels there are already dead or dying. And the last survivor, who's like barely barely alive, mentions a lone man who arrived and just started killing everybody. And he talked about and this guy kept ranting about wanting to find a boy and his droid. So this is sort of a hinting that it's Valance, the mercenary who really, really wants to kill Luke for, being on good terms with droids that was established in issue 16. And there is a bit of great dialogue here where after Vader forces the dying rebel to tell him everything, the rebel basically asks, now please ease the pain, and of course Vader says, "Ease the pain, rebel? I'll end it entirely," and just kills him. Great villain moment, in my opinion. And so Vader now knows that he's got a rival in, his hunt for the mysterious rebel. Oh, and so he basically, but he figures that he is nearby. He senses him, but he just doesn't know where. But he has an idea of where he might be, and so he orders the captain of the Star Destroyer that he's on to literally burn out the Star Destroyer's engines if he has to, because, Vader's not going to let anybody steal his kill. So, as if our heroes didn't already have enough to deal with Darth Vader is now hoving in, because the only population center close to this rebel base is the Wheel. And of course, you think Vader is going to care all that much about, the agreement that the Empire shouldn't interfere directly in the Wheel's affairs? And unlike Captain Strom, Vader is not someone that Gray Shade could reason with. So, okay, yes. Luke's regained consciousness, and he knows that Vader's nearby and that he might even be coming for them. He's reunited with Leia and the droid. They've got to save Han. However, at this point, it's the final round of this weird, sick gladiatorial match thing. It's down to Han and Chewie and one other guy who kind of looks like a weird Batman kind of alien. And all the other contestants are out. And Han knows that the third guy, the Batman alien, is just waiting for his chance. Yes. And he figures that the only way that he'll be able to get at the guy is if either he or Chewie, take each other out. And so what he does is he fakes having Chewie shoot him dead. Because, the gladiatorial game won't end until there's only one man left standing. Or, floating in this case. The final round is in a 0G environment. And it seems, and this is all broadcast across the Wheel, so Luke and Leia see what appears to be Chewie being forced to gun down Han Solo. And so, they're both distraught, obviously. But of course what they don't know is that the gladiators are armed with melee weapons and a little personal energy shield thing. And what Han did was he managed to conceal one of those shields inside of his clothes. And so the shield took the brunt of Chewie's shot. And so, he's still alive, but he's faking being dead. Because not only does this give Chewie his chance to take out the Batman alien, which he does, it also means that Chewie wins, and because, Han's always got his eye for the main chance, and this way, our two heroes can walk away with all the winnings. Because, there's prize money involved for, these gladiatorial bouts. And so, at last, our heroes have managed to make some money out of this debacle that they've managed to find themselves in. Of course, you know, all this while, Gray Shade has been trying to get Leia to, you know, stay with him. Because, again, and this is one of those things that, as much as the Wheel arc is a pretty fun story arc, it's a bit cheesy, but it's otherwise still pretty fun, more so than the other two previous ones. But it still does have a lot of that hokey plot contrivances, and it's like, you know, it's, again, that tired trope that a bad guy wants to try and seduce Leia. And of course, because, like, why bother? Because we know, you know, Leia is too principled and committed to the cause to, you know, go along with it. Because, like, how many guys have how many bad guys have tried this? I mean, I've already talked about Trioculus in The Jedi Prince. We have Gray Shade, and I know Prince Shizor famously tries to do so in Shadows of Empire. There was that one bit where she was arranged to marry Prince Isolder of the Happus Consortium, but that wasn't really a coercive thing, and Isolder wasn't a bad guy, so that doesn't count. And maybe it's not as common as I thought. Maybe I'm just aware of the really famous ones. Who knows? Anyway, but Leia is so horrified by the death of Han because, you know, this is still not very long after Alderaan was destroyed. Her homeworld is fresh in her mind, and, you know, in a way, she still kind of blames herself. You know, not kind of irrationally, but, you know, understandably, she blames herself for Alderaan's destruction. Because, you know, Tarkin used it to try and get at her with, you know, the location of the Rebel base. And, you know, basically, this is, you know, she thinks Han's dead. And, you know, someone that she knows and cares about has died in part because of her. Though I wouldn't say that's, you know, I don't think that's quite really her fault, really. Because, I mean, there was no way that... Because, like, you know, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me why she would think that she was responsible for Han's death. Or maybe it's because, you know, she kept refusing Gray Shade's advances because she wants, or like maybe if she tried to strike a deal with him to, she might have been able to get the others to safety and Han wouldn't have died. That might be it, because that's pretty much what happens here. Leia basically agrees to go with Gray Shade, but only on the condition that Luke and the droids and Chewie get to go free. And there's another thing. It's not terribly done, but it is kind of not as well done as it could have been. And that's basically Gray Shade having a kind of face turn, where he basically he beholds you know, Han's death and how his loss so impacts Leia and Luke, and it sort of starts him to think about you know, nobler sentiments than, you know, being the typical corrupt, self-centered bastard he's always been. And then, of course, you know, he finds out from Master Comm that, you know, the droid, like, before he catches up to Leia, Luke, and the droids, he learns of their escape and that Master Comm enabled it. And you know, he kind of demands, why? I never authorized you to do this. And, you know, after Master Comm gives out the old, you didn't not order me to, sir. You didn't forbid me to. And the droid admits that, you know, I'm kind of inspired by the example of R2 and 3PO, their loyalty and sense of genuine friendship for their master. And, you know, I realized that I too would like to have a friend, and the closest I have to one is you, Senator Gray Shade. So, you know, these two things, it seems, start the former senator thinking about, you know, what the kind of man he is and the choices he's made. It's not terribly done, but it's not as well done as it could have been. It does seem like too much of a sudden face turn. if you know what I mean. Yeah. Ooh, killed me single shot. Not bad, not bad. But, you know, yes, Greyshade does, you know, honor his promise to Leia. Strom and his desires be damned. And, you know, Luke, of course, objects to the idea of being separated from Leia because, you know, they still haven't yet decided that, oh, they're actually siblings. And there's even a moment where Leia kisses him goodbye. And I just think, yes. Yes. Oh, that's so awkward, given subsequent events. Ooh, excuse me. So anyway, meanwhile, though, of course, you know, Han is actually alive. He's just faking it. And, of course, he has Chewie play the role of the grief-stricken friend forced to kill his, Han in order to escape from that sick, twisted gladiatorial game. And, you know, this way, there's a plausible reason that no one's going to go near Han's body because, you know, who's going to piss off the angry, 8-foot-tall Wookiee? And so, you know, Han figures if we can just hold this off a little bit longer, we'll not only be able to, you know, help, save Luke, Leia, and the droids and escape, but we'll have also, you know, actually made some money out of this. It's been about time things have gone our way financially, he thinks to himself. Ooh, pardon me. Of course, Strom discovers a Greyshade going back on their agreement. Because remember, the whole idea was that Greyshade was going to make sure that none of the rebels left the wheel alive. But you know, Greyshade is still having his big face turn. In the hangar, where he basically decides to stay behind and duke it out with Strom, allowing Leia and Luke to escape safely along with the droids. And there is this, I guess they're trying to aim for a tragic scene where, tragically ambiguous scene, where both Greyshade and Master Comm are gravely injured. Greyshade is leaking a lot of blood, Master Comm's losing oil. Greyshade manages to kill Strom with a grenade. So that's that. And you know, then like the narrator himself describes, a cloud of smoke from the battle conceals conceals man and droid. So you know, their fates are left ambiguous. And you know, who knows? Maybe they will. Maybe they are gonna bring Greyshade back in a later story arc. Again, I don't think I think this idea of his redemption. It's not a bad idea, but I think that it does come a little too quickly. His face turn comes just a little too quickly and easily. I think there should have been a bit more to it. I mean, because otherwise it's not a bad idea, and Greyshade is a reasonably decent antagonist. So anyway, Strom is dead, but of course, and our heroes managed to make it to the ship. Alas, because, things can never go entirely Han's way. Chewie and he only managed to escape by losing pretty much all the money they were otherwise going to win from the gladiatorial games. Because, of course, Han's got to remain in debt to Jabba. Otherwise, there's no chance. And it's that we can have that amazing scene in The Empire Strike. Well, in Return of the Jedi, actually. Oh, actually, that reminds me. Because the first 6 issues of Marvel Star Wars 1977 was an adaptation of A New Hope. It even includes the meeting Jabba scene, the one that was originally cut from the film, and then, famously, rather infamously, I should say, brought back in the special edition, even though, again, it's one of those things that kills the pacing. And that's why, I recommend it, if possible, get the despecialized edition of the original trilogy if you can. That's my personal recommendation, dear friends. And yeah, they do like have the scene with Jabba in the comic adaptation, and it's basically that Jabba appears as this weird hamster-looking guy. Like he's humanoid, but he has like he's like a furry kind of alien thing. Because this is long before they decided they knew what a hut was. And again, it's one of those interesting little artifacts of the past that makes this old comic and a lot of older pieces of Star Wars media so fascinating to me. So anyways, our heroes make it back to the Falcon. Han's lost his money, so he's not all that happy, but survival is at least a decent place to finish up, even if it's not ideal. The problem is, it looks like they've only escaped the frying pan to land in the fire, because who should arrive at the wheel about this time but Darth Vader. And so now the Falcon has to fight its way past an Imperial Star Destroyer. Oh, happy days. Except then the Falcon actually manages to do some serious damage to the Star Destroyer, which, again, I can only chalk this up to this being very early in Star Wars history. It was like a freighter that size, even with like the tricked out weapons and armor that Han's got, actually, like maybe evading a Star Destroyer, maybe, but like actually going toe to toe with it, no shot. That's like no way. And of course, so it does. But anyway, the Falcon actually does some damage to the Star Destroyer. Vader recognizes the Falcon because this was the ship that that stopped him at the last moment from shooting down Luke's X-Wing. And so, Vader immediately sees another target of opportunity for revenge. And then here's, again, one of those things that's another very much of its time, very dated artifact. And it's because Luke actually steps up to the plate to counter Vader. But the thing is, and I gotta quote the comic again. Oh, right. I'm completely forgot this part. Leia and, Han, Leia, and Chewie are aboard the Falcon, but Luke and the droids are aboard Gray Shade's personal yacht, because that was originally the ship they were going to depart on as part of the deal that Leia would stay with Gray Shade aboard the wheel. So Luke's not on the Falcon here. Oop, avoid that. Oop. But okay, yes. So Luke calls upon the Force, but the narrator says this way. Then he cries out at first it seems for a moment Luke doesn't speak. The Force fills his thoughts. Then he cries out in rage and frustration. Rage at regaining a friend thought dead only to see him about to be slain again. Frustration at having a vast power and not knowing how to save Han with it. But channels have been opened here, opened by the Dark Lord probing with the Force. Because, Darth Vader's also, he also reaches out with the Force to sense things. And, opened but forgotten in the thought of vengeance for his one great defeat, until all of Luke's raging feelings like lightning carried along a wire from one place it has struck to another, blast into Darth Vader's unprotected mind. And apparently this distracts Vader sufficiently that Luke and company are able to escape. And obviously you can see the problem here. But then again, it may not be entirely a deal breaker after all. Luke has obviously still untried and untested in the ways of the Force. So obviously he wouldn't yet know about the warnings of the darker emotions. So maybe I shouldn't be quite as concerned about this bit as I ought to be. But yeah, Luke uses the Force to temporarily, I guess, stun, for lack of any better term I can think of, Darth Vader. And this gives our heroes a chance to escape. But of course, Luke knows that he only just barely managed to save their bacon from the fire. Vader is a very, very dangerous enemy. And it's going to take more than, taking him by surprise and a little bit of, I guess, mind scouring, for lack of any better term. I don't know if there's a technical name for such a Jedi ability, if that even exists in either, the Disney or the old Expanded Universe canon. It'll take more than that to beat the Dark Lord. And so, that's where the wheel arc ends, with our heroes narrowly escaping certain doom. And that's sort of where the story leaves off. And that's pretty much it for this stream. I would say the wheel arc is better than the previous ones. And that's because the other arcs were like too short. They didn't have enough time to really flesh things out, as I see it. Anyway, whereas the wheel arc kind of did. It allowed the plot to really develop itself. Even though I think they could have spent a little bit more time and devoted less to the various shenanigans going on with regards to all the gambling, and spent more of that time on fleshing out Gray Shade, because I think that if they'd done that, his little redemption at the end would have felt more appropriate. But so far, and of course, we've introduced Valance, who's clearly going to be an antagonist in the future. We've seen him introduced in issue 16, and when Vader was going through that destroyed Rebel base, we've even sort of gotten a reminder that he exists and that he's going to be showing up at some point. Though as yet, he has yet to encounter Luke, because that's his target. So it's going to be interesting, I think. And again, while there are a lot of issues and things that were retconned later on for me to regard 1977 Marvel Star Wars as canon, I do think that it is otherwise fairly solid. If you like, especially if you enjoy, if you can enjoy the pulpier, sort of cheesier side of things, which I do to some extent. And so yeah, I think it's fairly decent, and I kind of look forward to doing a few more of the storylines in a future stream. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hope you have a good night, and happy holidays.